Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. We're just waiting for
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
6 o'clock on the dot, inshallah. Let's start.
All right, excellent.
We are live.
We are live.
So just so you guys know, I'll go ahead and actually, I think it's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and officially begin. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to everybody out there that's logging on. While people are still logging on, it's just turning 6 o'clock right now. Just want to give a quick welcome to all of you that are already here. Welcome to our speakers and guests, Ustada Fatima, Brother Edward Ahmed Mitchell, and Ustad Hassan Faye. Alhamdulillah, thank you guys so much for joining us. So the reason for this session is we had questions coming in from parents and some of our young people that are trying to make sense out of what they're seeing on the news, what's kind of happening in real life all around us, and they're looking for some direction and clarity. And we wanted to make sure that inshallah we provided some voices to give some perspective, some local leadership perspective on some direction and clarity. And so I'm going to ask inshallah ta'ala each one of our esteemed guests and speakers here to maybe share for about 5 minutes some of their own personal reflections on what's currently happening, the murder of George Floyd, the resparking up of this movement to weed out systemic racism from our midst, and however they see it, whatever it is that they're seeing from their lens and from their experiences. So inshallah, I want to ask each one of you to share for about 5 minutes, inshallah, while our speakers are talking and sharing. If you, the viewers, guys that are watching, if you have any questions, we are on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. If you're joining through our website link, click on that live stream and go to the YouTube Live, because there will be a chat box on YouTube Live. There's a comment section on our Facebook Live. Put your questions and comments that you have in those boxes, and I will do my best to get them to our speakers after they have kind of shared their thoughts for them to reflect on them, inshallah ta'ala, as well. But we want to go ahead and begin. I'd like to ask Ustada Fatima if she would like to open us off with some of her thoughts, inshallah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbi zidni ilma. The past couple of weeks, I would say, have been very intense. They've been very traumatizing. They've been very emotional. They've been very much so like, I don't really know how to put it into words, but it has been an out-of-body experience. And I say that because this is not the first time that this situation, that the killings of Black men or the killings of African-American people in this country has occurred. These are things that have constantly, this is a reality that has constantly been there and has constantly been happening. What has made it even more, I would say, in my own reflection over these past couple of weeks, actually, what has made it even more hitting home for me personally has been having conversations with people in my family and realizing that they too are not necessarily scared, but it's now more so of like, okay, who's next? When something becomes so it happens so many times that now we're not even asking, why is this happening? We're not even asking, who allowed this to happen? We're not even asking other questions. We're asking who's next. That means that this situation that has been happened one too many times, and every life is sacred. So yesterday, actually, I was giving a small talk on racism and a talk on police brutality and all of these things. And I just wanted to share like some portions, at least from an Islamic standpoint, um, of what I researched and what that meant to me. In Surah Ali Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatihi. He says, "O you who believe, O you who claim belief," because we're all Muslim here and we're, talking to our community, a Muslim community. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O you who believe, O you who claim to believe, ittaqillah, fear Allah, be mindful of Allah, be conscious, be aware of God, haqqa tuqatihi, and give him his right. وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ." And always devote yourself to God. Make sure that you're devoting yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make sure that you are doing everything that you can to die on good, to die in a way that you made sure that you are dying in a good state. And the next part of this ayah in Surah Ali Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Hold firmly on to the rope of Allah together. And this portion of the ayah really got me, because when we think about the different things in life that separate us, in the next ayah, the next part of the ayah actually says, وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and don't be separate, don't go into different, groups. When we think about the different things that separate us, and then you think about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here, God says for us to hold on together to the rope of Allah, to his rope. And what that means is that we are to stand up for things in this world that are much bigger than us. They're much bigger than where I come from, my ideology, what I believe, this and that. It's much bigger than that. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to hold firmly to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded of us, to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us is valuable, to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, that we should do, to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that we should stay away from. And when I was reading this verse, it really hit me, because it made me think about all of the things that are going on in the world today, and realizing that, part of our true manifestation of our Iman is that we stand up against injustices, is that we stand up for our brothers and sisters that are being traumatized every single day, who are afraid to walk out of their doors. I have people I know, I was having a conversation with one of my family members, and this particular person is someone who goes to people's homes to fix things. And the conversation ended up where they were telling me that, I'm afraid to like get out the car and go into somebody's house and come back out, and like a police officer or somebody standing there thinking that I stole this vehicle, when really this is my job. My job is literally to go into people's homes, fix things for them, and depart. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to hold firmly to his rope. And his rope are the morals and values that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear about distinction between people. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hujurat, he says, Ya ayyuhan nas. And this particular verse was actually revealed at an incredible time. It's at a time when, at the end of the conquest of Mecca, and the Prophet ﷺ is there, and the Prophet ﷺ commands Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu to stand on top of the Kaaba and give adhan. And think about this, Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu endured so much torture in Mecca. He endured so much hardship in Mecca, that he was dragged through the streets, beaten, and all kinds of things that we've all heard these stories before. And even after he was in Mecca and Medina too, he still encountered some type of racism amongst people, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ tells Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu to stand on top of the Kaaba and give the adhan. And Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu does so. And there was a Qurayshi man who was in the audience, who was there because everybody had gathered. It's a conquest, like the battle's over. The Muslims have won. And there were some Qurayshi men who were inside of the gathering, and one of them in particular said, "Thank God my father died before this day." And someone turned to him and was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Because it's the day that a Black slave, a Black man, is on top of like the most sacred thing that we have. Like, thank God he died before seeing this moment." And the Prophet ﷺ, he was not a person who would get angry about his own affairs, but when other people's boundaries were crossed, when other people were treated badly, when other people, were put down for just different things, the Prophet ﷺ stood up for them. And the Prophet ﷺ was not happy with this statement. He was very upset, and he called the people who said this. And this verse was revealed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people. And mind you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just saying, oh, you who believe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, oh, people, every single one of you in this gathering. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. You have been created from man and woman. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. And we made you from different nations and tribes so that you can get to know one another. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That the most honorable one amongst you all, the ones who really have true honor, are the ones who are God conscious and aware of God. And that is something that lies within the heart. Okay? Inna Allah alimun khabir. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowing and He's all aware. And this ayah really hits home for me, especially in the climate and the situation that we're at, because every time you get online, every time you walk in the store, every time you breathe air, someone's telling you you're not worthy. Someone's telling you you're not worthy to exist in this place, in this space. Someone's telling you you're not worthy to breathe. You're not worthy to get an education. You're not worthy to be financially stable. You're not worthy to walk out of your home. You're not worthy to sit in your home. You're not worthy to take a walk. You're not worthy to take a jog. Don't go running at night. Don't go running during the day. Don't enter into your home. Make sure you look both ways. Make sure you do this. Make sure you do that. There's so many rules and regulations because people are literally saying you're not worthy. But if we as Muslims practice our iman properly, if we as Muslims practice our faith properly, then this type of racism, that racism in general, would not exist. And to close off my point, Malcolm X, when he went for Hajj, he had some of the most amazing observations during his journey. And one quote that I want to quote from him is that he said, America needs to understand Islam, because this is the one religion that erases from its society the race problem. Throughout my travels in the Muslim world, I have met, talked to, and even eaten with people who in America would have been considered white, but the white attitude was removed from their minds by the religion of Islam. I've never before seen sincere and true brotherhood practiced by all colors together, irrespective of their color. And I find that to be so beautiful, because I feel like if we as a community got back to that, if we as a community got back to the true Islam, our true faith, our true practicing of faith, that we know that these things are happening right outside of our doors, but they're happening right now currently in our masajid as well. And so if us as a community got back to our true faith, we'll actually be able to help uplift our brothers and sisters. We'll actually be able to help them through these traumatic times, because it's truly traumatic. And so my thoughts with this is that this is a time that we have to come together. And it's not coming together just for right now, but it's coming together for the long run. And if we truly call ourselves believers, we truly call ourselves a community, we truly call ourselves the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, then it's time for us to stand up right now, that this is the moment.
Jazakallah khair, Ustad Fatima. Alhamdulillah. I had a couple of questions that kind of came up from some of the points you were mentioning, inshallah. But let's maybe get through everybody kind of sharing their thoughts, and I think you guys can have maybe a lively discussion even amongst yourselves with some of these questions, inshallah ta'ala. But I want to invite Ustaz Hassan Fay, inshallah, to share some of his thoughts as well. Ustaz Hassan.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So I was at a friend's house like a while back, and we were at the dinner table, and we were kind of discussing something, and we made a joke out of it. But in hindsight, when I sat and reflected on it, it made so much sense to me. And that was they were asking me like when I went to like get a car, it was whatever the salesperson told me, this car is worth this much. I didn't try to argue. I didn't try to say, oh, can you bring it down? I didn't try to bargain. right? And I'm essentially like that in every aspect of life, where I'm agreeable. I don't like confrontation. I run away from it. Um, Even when I'm in the right, I'll just I'll just say it's fine, right? If someone even owes me money and I know they owe me money, I'd rather be like, here, you got it, you can take it. I'm just gonna go the other way, right? And they was just like, no, you have to stand up. You just have to stand your ground. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to do this. You have to do that. And I started reflecting. I was thinking, like, where did I get this from, right? And it came to me that this is how I was raised since I was a child, to never cause problems or never cause trouble or never stir up any trouble because of the color of my skin. And so, because of the color of my skin, if I stir up trouble or anything of that sort, I'm seen as something different than if a counterpart of mine who might be white, Arab, Desi, or otherwise stir up trouble, right? I'm seen differently. And for me, it's more of an animalistic thing, like more these guys are barbaric and so on and so forth. So I was always taught from my mother to when I came to America, my adopted mother, my aunts, everyone always told me like, be careful, don't never stir up trouble. And I, all these years of that level and that conditioning made me just kind of never really want to start anything, even to the point where, again, I mean, everyone tries to get a bargain when they're going to buy a car. Me, it didn't even cross my mind. Whatever the guy told me, I was like, all right, that's it. that. And people were like making fun of me, like, bro, like, what? You could have got like 4, 5, 6,000 below that. And I'm just like, it didn't even cross my mind. And that was the reason why. And this reality is the reality that I think most, if not all, uh, people of color, black people, are living with in the West. Um, and more so the ones that are actually African American, meaning they didn't come from Gambia or come from Ghana or come from these other countries, and like I might have, right? I came here at a young age and I've been dealing with that ever since. But they've been dealing with it since the day they were born. You know what I'm saying? So it's the reality. Unfortunately, that like Ustad Fatima was saying, even in your own home. I think my wife the other day, I said, even in my own home, let's say we have some kind of altercation or something that happens, and a neighbor hears it and they decide to call the cops. More than likely, if I know that they call the cops, now I'm actually fearful for my life, that I might, something might happen with me. So now I have to think, how can I be as docile as possible, as passive as possible, as agreeable as possible, as non-threatening, quote unquote, as possible, right? In my own home, because someone else has called the cops. You don't even have to go out anymore. You understand what I'm saying? So when this, I know George Floyd sparked it. Like it was kind of just like the straw that broke the camel's back, right? But we had Ahmed Arbery all within this from February to now. We had Breonna Taylor. We had our brother here from Georgia, who Care Georgia is taking care of, right? So we have all of, and then another one I just heard about, a Gambian brother who also got murdered by the cops, and we don't know the details of that one yet. So we're quiet on that until we find out more. But these are the realities, right? These are the realities that we live with. And for me, what I want to focus on is actually the ayah that Ustad Fatima read, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, right? And he said, وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا وَكُنْتُمْ عَلَى شَفَا حُفْرَةٍ مِّنَ النَّارِ. SubhanAllah, very beautiful ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een to hold on to his rope and do not, وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, right? Do not, disperse and, disagree and do all of these things, or don't let your disagreements, make you to go away from each other, right? So because if you're holding on to a rope, then you're all there together, right? You're all there together. So even if you disagree, just make sure you never let go of that rope, right? So when you think about that imagery, as Muslims, yes, we might have disagreements, we might have this, we might have that, but we're holding on to the one rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together. And this is the rope of Islam. And with everything that we do, we're guided by Islam, right? Islam actually trumps everything else, right? Our own skin color. Islam trumps all of that, right? So when we think about holding on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to me, it's profound, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in a different ayah, inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to change a condition of people until they themselves change their own conditions. And upon reflection, what that means to me in the Muslim community, because we're talking about the Muslim community, right? So in the Muslim community, what that means to me is, until our hearts come together, until our hearts are together, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to try to help us change our condition. So we will keep going with this. It's going to keep happening over and over and over and over again, unless and until we actually come together in here, in our hearts, right? Because we can say it all we want. We can preach it all we want. We can stand on a member and say it all we want. But the people that are listening, number one, the person that is preaching it, and then number two, the ones that are listening to the person preach, if they're not changed by that, then we're still in the same situation. It's going to be a cycle over and over and over and over again. But when we truly come together, when someone looks at me and doesn't see, oh, this person is a black person, and black people, some of them know their deen, but most of them don't. So in your head, you're thinking, oh, maybe I need to teach this person their deen. Or you see a black person and you ask him, and I was just asked this recently, when did you convert to Islam? This is recent, very, very recent. I was asked this question. You understand what I'm saying? So until we change that kind of mindset, we have not come together in here, because that person would not see an Arab and ask that Arab when they converted to Islam, right? They would not see a Pakistani or an Afghani, or so people from these places, they would not see them and dare ask them such a question. So why do you feel the need to ask me that question, right? Because you think that, being black is not necessarily a Muslim thing, right? So unless and until that level of ignorance changes, right, then nothing is going to get solved, right? We're discussing right now how the Muslim community can come in solidarity with the black Muslims and the black the African American community and so on and so forth. I've been quiet on that because all I'm seeing is things that I'm just like, we've been doing this. We've been doing this, and I'm sorry, this is real talk, so I'm just being completely honest. But we've been doing the same thing, right? And expecting different results. No. And then most of the people that I'm seeing speaking don't have a single trace of melanin in their skin. What do I mean by that? They're not black. Let the black people who have been dealing with this come and tell you what they need from you, right? We don't need this whole superhero complex from other people. We need your allyship. What we need is your allyship. You come and say, listen, what can we do? We know that, this has been a problem. I've seen it myself. So what can we do? My own friends, right? We went to a funeral one time, and I'll end with this. We went to a funeral one time, and this man came, and he was from one of the countries, India or Pakistan. He came, and we were standing in a row of four. I was the third person in the row. This person came and shook my friend's hand, shook my second friend's hand. Wallahi, he skipped right over me and went and shook the fourth person's hand, who was also Daisy. And my friend, the fourth one, looked at me in shock, in awe. And I just looked at him and smiled. I was like, this is our reality. I've been dealing with this for 20 years. I don't, you're shocked because this is your first time you're dealing with it, but we've been dealing with this. So come to us. Tell us, like, what have you been dealing with? What have you experienced? How can we change it, right? And first, we have to change our hearts. Like I said, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in that I remember when your hearts were separate and He brought your hearts together, right? He brought your hearts together. And وَكُنْتُمْ إِخْوَانًا, until you became brothers and sisters, until you love for the other what you love for your own self. You see what I'm saying? So once we get to that point, then we can, when we're together as a ummah, then we can actually go out and affect real change. And then when we speak, And when we go marching and when we go protesting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that our hearts are together. So therefore he will help us affect change because we're preaching what we're practicing ourselves. Allah knows best. Barakallah feek.
Jazakallah khair, Ustad Hassan. MashaAllah. These are, I mean, subhanAllah, when you express these, these realities, and they are so foreign to so many people, especially in the immigrant Muslim community, and this is a reality we have to face. One of the things you mentioned, hold on to the rope of Allah. You and Ustad Fatima both brought up that ayah, and just from my perspective alone, I can tell you guys that sometimes it feels like instead of people viewing this deen as they're holding on to the rope of Allah, sometimes they're viewing it as they're holding the rope for other people. And this is a major issue that we have to overcome, especially when you talk about what to expect from people when they walk in the masjid doors and what kind of Islam they practice or what kind of Islam they portray, etc., etc. Sometimes, may Allah forgive us, but it almost feels like we feel like we're holding the rope that everybody else should hold on to in order to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah azza wa jal remove this from our hearts. We have our brother Edward as well, and I do have questions for you guys, inshallah, that I would love to hear all of y'all's perspective on, inshallah. But brother Edward, please enlighten us as well.
Sure. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So first, Jazakallah khairan to Imam Arshad for and RCM for hosting this gathering, and Jazakallah khairan to Brother Hassan and our esteemed Sister Fatima for your remarks. Jazakallah khairan. May Allah protect both of you and reward you, increase you in knowledge and wisdom, and make everything to come for you easier than what has come before. So I'll just share a very brief thoughts, partly because it's been a somewhat exhausting week talking about this issue, but also because I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for people to ask questions if they have any, inshallah. So I want to share a few thoughts, and forgive me if any of these seem random, but they're just thoughts, inshallah. So number one, for many people, you might be asking yourself, what can I do? I'm outraged over what I've seen. I want to do something helpful, but at the same time, we're in a pandemic. I want to be safe. I don't want to be part of a protest that turns dangerous or violent or engages in property damage. What can I do? And I don't want to put myself out in front of my Black neighbors. I want to follow their lead. People are just asking themselves these questions. What can I do? When should I do it? What should I not do? Who should I listen to? Who should I follow, etc. So the first thing I would say is to make things easier for yourself, think about and worry about what you can control, right? The first thing you can, inshallah, control is yourself, right? That's the first thing. The first thing you can change, inshallah, is yourself. So if you yourself have some ingrained prejudices, if you yourself know you've made inappropriate jokes or remarks, if you yourself know that you have something inside yourself that needs fixing, especially when it comes to the issue of racism, anti-Black racism, or for that matter, some sort of hostility towards people of a different culture, a different nationality, then maybe this is a time for you to work on fixing that yourself, inshallah. That's the first thing. The second thing is your family, right? You are likely trapped at home right now with your family. So if you've got parents who would object to you marrying someone of a different race or culture, if you've got parents who would never go and visit a majority Black masjid because they think those people don't have Islam exactly right, if you have siblings who've made inappropriate or make inappropriate jokes, and by the way, I have many siblings, and when they were younger, I would hear them make inappropriate remarks and jokes about Black people, even though they're Black, other Black people. I've heard remarks about Jewish people, white people, just stupid stuff that kids say, and they don't realize how dangerous it is, how inappropriate it is, and you have to call them on that stuff. So if you see that sort of stuff within your household, within your family, then call it out. Worry about fixing those things you can control first. And then the next outer level for Muslims is the masjid, our house of worship, right? If you see problems in your houses of worship, especially issues related to race, address that. Have you ever heard someone, speaking Arabic, your masjid refer to Black people with a certain Arabic word that is not appropriate to be used for African Americans? call them out on that, right? If you see, black kids at your masjid who are playing around, having fun, being treated very harshly compared to kids of a different race who get to run around and be wild and aren't treated as harshly, say something about that, address that. If at your masjid, you have a diverse population, but there are no black people on your board, or for that matter, no Arabs or no Pakistanis or no whatever on your board, you have a monolithic board, all one gender, all one race, maybe that's something that you should try to address within your community. If you've got a masjid that interacts with local government or local police in a way that makes some people in your community feel unsafe, maybe voice those concerns. I'll give you an example. Many masajid have police officers who come to their masajid to provide security. I support that. I think it's a good idea to do it, especially in these dangerous circumstances. But some people feel very uncomfortable around the police because of experiences they've had with them in the past. So that's at least a conversation that should be had. And you should also make sure that police officers know what the limits are, where they should not be going, what they should not be doing, what they should do if they see a problem. Think about those things. What sensitivities might people have that you may not be aware of or may not be thinking of in terms of their interactions with law enforcement? And of course, if you're able to have private security, even Muslim security, that's great. And that avoids and nips that issue in the bud. So just think about the things you can change, that you can control in your own self, your family, your house of worship, your own community. And that could also apply to your schools, your colleges. Colleges are a great testing ground for life because, in that environment, you got people of different political views, religious views, racial views. There are often things that go wrong. A professor does something inappropriate. Student group does something inappropriate, some violent fight happens, sexual abuse happens. There are all sorts of problems that happen on college campuses, including racism. That's a chance for you to, practice real life activism in the college setting. So that's the first thing I'd say. Don't worry about trying to save the whole world or making sure that you got to be at the front of every protest that happens. Worry about what you can control in your own life. Next thing I would say is stay optimistic, especially for people who were born maybe a few years before 9/11, or after 9/11, you grew up in an era of war, the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, drone strikes, an economic collapse, the Great Recession, the things that happened, ISIS, Donald Trump getting elected. I mean, it has been a wild, crazy 20 years going back to 9/11. So it can be somewhat depressed. Hurricane Katrina. I mean, there's so many things that I'm missing out. And of course, most recently, this spate of killings of unarmed African American men, which, by the way, has been happening for a long time, but we're just noticing it now and taking more, and more people are noticing it now and taking more notice of it because it's being filmed on cell phone cameras. So when you see these things happening back to back, these horrific killings, shootings, strangulations, it can be depressing. It can be overwhelming. So I would just say stay optimistic. If you think back to any time in history, every generation lives at a time where things seem like they were horrible. If your parents are born in the 1950s, guess what? They grew up in a time when they saw Martin Luther King be assassinated, Malcolm X be assassinated, the Civil Rights Act passed, but states still fight segregation for years and years and years. People don't remember Martin Luther King was unpopular at the time that he was killed. It seemed like he had largely failed because even though legislation had been passed advancing civil rights, it hadn't trickled down and hadn't had a widespread of successful effect yet across the country. People were still fighting segregation. And by the way, Richard Nixon got elected president in a landslide in 1968 and reelected in 1972. So people go through times where it seems depressing. If you were born in the 1920s, right, you would have seen the Great Depression. You would have seen the world nearly fall apart in World War II. You would have seen the world nearly come to an end with nuclear war, potentially. So every generation goes through these things. And as Muslims in our history, all the things we've gone through, we've seen the Ridda Wars where people rejected Islam and wars broke out. We saw the Crusades. We've seen all sorts of things. I mean, the list goes on. The loss of Spain, the eradication of Muslims from Spain, and of course, we've seen in recent years, all that's happened in the Middle East, the collapse of the Arab Spring, the rise of the secular, the return with a vengeance of secular Arab dictatorships, attacking and fighting and killing observant Muslims who want to engage in activism. All this can be depressing, but I would just say stay optimistic. Things are in this life are never as good as they seem, and they're never as bad as they seem, right? The good things are not permanent in this life, and the bad things are not permanent either. Verily with difficulty comes relief. Verily with difficulty comes relief. And the help of Allah is always, inshallah, near for the believer. So stay optimistic, respond to evil with good, make dua. Don't just post things on social media, but make dua. Dua is the weapon of the believer. So when things get tough, people should becoming even closer to Allah. I found it amusing that in 2017, Pew did a poll, and they surveyed the American Muslim community to see what are our religious views, our political views, and they found that less than half of American Muslims reported praying 5 times a day. And this poll was taken in 2017. So this is after Donald Trump has been elected, after the spate of hate crimes against Muslims. You would think we would all be running to prayer, right? We'd be praying on time, on point, at the masjid, trying to get in the front row. But more than half of us in America, Muslims, not praying on time or praying the 5 daily prayers according to that poll. And also the poll indicated large number of Muslims not eating halal and doing all sorts of other stuff, very embracing views about sexual activity that are completely inappropriate, just all sorts of things that were happening that you would think would not be happening, because when there are no atheists in foxholes, is the saying, right? That people get closer to God when times are difficult. So Muslims, we should be doing that. In times of difficulty, we shouldn't get depressed. We should get optimistic and hope in Allah. That doesn't mean you can't be sad. It doesn't mean that you may not feel bouts of depression, but it shouldn't take you to the point of giving up your salat, giving up your prayer, or stopping your attempts to do good, stopping your attempts to change things for the better. So that's the second piece of advice. The last thing I would note is that for those of you who decide to engage in activism, who decide to get out there and fight the good fight, make sure that Islam, that our faith, our deen, is guiding both what you advocate for and how you advocate for it. I am absolutely convinced, after having worked, in this sphere of Muslim activism now for almost 5 years, and seeing what I've seen, that the greatest threat to Muslims in America is not Donald Trump. It's not anti-Muslim bigots. It is us. We are the greatest threat to Muslims in America. What I mean by that is that if, may Allah forbid, we have our masajid closed down by, some sort of crazy fascist government one day, may Allah forbid. If many Muslims get deported back to the Muslim countries they came from because we are ruled by a government that is even more power than this one does, and they decide to get rid of Muslims, may Allah forbid that happens. Even if, something truly horrible happens where Muslims were subjected to the sort of violence that African Americans were subjected to and are still subjected to for decades and hundreds of years in this country, may Allah forbid that happens. But even if all that happened, it's still not the worst case scenario, because we would still have our faith. We would still have our iman. We would still have our deen. And therefore, we would still be, one way or another, eventually, sooner or later, okay, in this life or the next, inshallah. But if we ourselves give up our deen, that is, if we start contradicting the basic values of our faith because we want to be cool with our liberal friends and allies, or because we want to go along to get along, because we're afraid that people will be mad at us if we stand up for what we believe in, and if, may Allah really forbid, we actively start expressing opinions that contradict, that we know contradict things that we have to believe as people of faith, that we have to believe as Muslims, then we may have won the battle for getting it easy, being able to take it easy in America for a while, but we have lost the larger struggle for our faith. And that is much more dangerous than losing our immigration status or our property or even our lives. May Allah forbid any of that happen. So for young activists in particular, just be very careful in what you advocate for, what opinions you take, what positions you take, and also how you advocate for it. We as Muslims do not believe in burning things to the ground. We do not believe in hurting people when we get angry. We don't even believe in getting angry and losing our temper, right? We believe that you shouldn't get angry. If you get angry, control your anger. Don't act on that anger, right? Be level-headed. Emotion is okay, but don't let it overtake you and lead you to do something foolish. So when we are protesting, when we are speaking, when we are being activists, we're not cursing people out. We're not being destructive. We're not doing crazy things. We are acting as Muslims. We are doing what our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would want us to do. And also, by the way, what the great activists of recent years would do. Malcolm X, as fiery as he was, as tough as he was, he never went out and burned anything into the ground. You can't find a video of him cursing someone out. right? You cannot find that sort of footage because he was respectful, he was respectable, and he was a Muslim who believed in following Islam in both what he advocated for and how he advocated for it. So those are just some things that I want to share with all of you, especially our young people in the community. I hope some of that is helpful. If I said anything positive, alhamdulillah, anything negative, may Allah forgive me. And again, Jazakallah khair to RCM for hosting this gathering, and may Allah guide it to be beneficial to all.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Edward. Jazakallah khair for all of you guys for sharing your thoughts here. There are some questions that are coming into the comments, and some things that are kind of coming up through what you guys are mentioning. One of the things, and I'll just kind of put it out there, is sometimes people get intimidated by the conversation about racism. So as a khatib, even you give a khutbah on racism, people can get a little bit tense because for some reason they think that if you have racist behaviors in you, that automatically you are now equivalent to a white supremacist for some. So is there some comments that you guys can give some clarification on? If people have behaviors that are racist, are they now, should they just consider themselves full-on racist and then they just ignore that claim? Or is there some kind of balance or some kind of personal exercise they can do to come to terms with what they've just been told or just has been pointed out to them?
So, actually, when I hear that, I actually think about kind of a situation that happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina with Abu Dar. So what happened was that Abu Dar radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, they got into an argument and they were exchanging words back and forth. And towards the end of the argument, Abu Dar turned to Bilal and in a very derogatory way, he told him, like, basically, you son of a black woman. Basically, he was like, I'm done with this argument, like, whatever. Like, that was a very racist comment. So Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he didn't continue the argument. He just went straight to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ was very upset. Like, his face had turned red. He was very upset. He called Abu Dar. Abu Dar came and the Prophet ﷺ told him, he said that, inside of you is ignorance. Inside of you is ignorance. And I bring in the end of that story ended up where Abu Dar went. He apologized for his, comment. He told Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu to put his foot on his face to show how remorseful he was for what he had said, so on and so forth. I bring that narration to say that the way that you rid ignorance is by educating yourself and realizing that you have ignorance within yourself, right? This racist feeling that you're having inside when, you see somebody, maybe you see somebody with a certain skin color and you automatically, like what Ustad Hassan was mentioning, automatically assume that this person is somebody who's, doesn't know how to read Quran or whatever the case may be. You need to go and you need to educate yourself and make it a point that you correct those types of thoughts that come to your mind as soon as they come to your mind. Meaning you don't fester, you don't go and have a conversation about it saying, oh, do you think X, Y, and Z, like this? No, you correct it immediately. Like, this is inappropriate for me to think this. It is not okay for me to think like this. And you should make dua for yourself. That's first and foremost. You should also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. That's second. And the third thing is that I believe that a lot of intolerance or a lot of us not understanding, people from other races or being racist towards other people comes from not actually truly accepting people into our spaces or the spaces that we share with them. So you will see people will come to the masjid, they may, experience their diversity in that particular masjid, but they will not have a conversation with a single person of color. Like someone who's Black, they will not have a conversation with them ever. They will know that that's sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so, have an idea that that's that person, but I don't feel comfortable talking to them. Well, why don't you feel comfortable talking to them? So in order for you to bridge that gap, it's very important for you to make sure that you're being tolerant. And by tolerant, I mean by you're going out of your own comfort zone and making sure that you're interacting truly with the community. There's a reason why when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, he said, "Afshu salama bainakum," spread peace amongst one another. Wa at'imu ta'am, and break bread with each other, like eat with each other. not just go drop, food and say, oh, this is for charity, da da da, whatever. No, eat with one another, share your culture with each other, share your experiences with one another, like be a community. And then what does the Prophet say? He says, "Wasallu bil-layli wan-nas niyam," and make dua, pray in the night while the people are sleeping. You need to pray for the community. You need to pray for yourself. And then he says, "Tadkhulul jannah bisalam," and you will enter into paradise peacefully. That these are things that these feelings that are this way of thinking or this way of seeing people is rooted in something, and you need to remove that ignorance that is rooted in. Those are my thoughts. Anybody else want to share?
Inshallah, we'll just go in order. Have Sheikh Edward do the last. So for me, I think that's an important question for sure that we need to address. I think the first thing for me would be, when a person is sincere, and then they're called out on what they've said, or something that they've done that is, racist, or have, it's like racist tendencies, then they shouldn't feel like, oh, now I'm a white supremacist and so on and so forth. But your sincerity will say, you know what, thank you for reminding me, and thank you for letting me know, and I will work on changing that thing. I was on live on Friday, and someone came in on Instagram. Someone that came in Muslim, and I was correcting something that I had posted earlier about the store owners and whatnot. The reason why I posted it was to get awareness for us in our own Muslim communities. So, anyways, I came on there and I said, let me correct it and make sure that everyone knows the actual facts, right? Because it's not about me. It's, if I say something wrong, I should be able to correct it publicly myself, right? Trying to be an example. So this brother came on and he was like, so you accuse such and such without knowledge, and Daisy brother, and I was just like, okay, well, I addressed what he said. I was like, no, that's not the case. It was such and such and such. Anyways, I addressed it, and then he stayed on the live, and I was like, listen, if you right now we're talking about the issue of, you know, black brothers and black sisters being killed by cops and being treated unfairly, and if you don't want to join in the discussion, you can exit the live, but don't add negativity. So, anyways, he stayed on the live. He was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. So on and so forth. The brother messaged me later on and was basically apologizing for even saying something. He said, I should have never said something. I stayed on and I listened to everything that you had to say, and everything that you were saying was correct. It was on point, so on and so forth. And for me, I told him, I said, see, that is the sincerity that we need in the Muslim community. I said, you didn't come on there to cause trouble. You were sincere. How do I know you didn't? Because you came back and you apologized for what you did. You see what I'm saying? So when someone calls you out on, what you're doing, and we have to do better as well. For me personally, I have to do better because I've dealt with this in my life a lot of times, hundreds of times. Especially being someone that is a Quran reciter who leads Salah, who gives like all, so on and so forth, right? People always kind of look at you sideways when you get up there to lead, and then afterwards they come with the most racist of things they could say, thinking that they're giving you a compliment. They come to you, brother, you led the Salah? MashaAllah, you sound like an Arab. No, I don't. I sound like a Gambian. That's what I sound like, right? I sound like a Gambian from West Africa. That's what I sound like. But, you know, unfortunately, I myself, like I was telling you guys earlier, I wouldn't correct that person. And that's wrong on my part. So I cannot really blame that person for that they keep doing that if I didn't take the steps to correct them, because I felt like, oh, I don't want to embarrass the person, right? I don't want the person to think I'm angry, so on and so forth. But enough is enough. It's okay. You can correct with mercy, you can correct with kindness, but correct, right? You have to correct. So if I tell the person, like, you know what, with all due respect, that comment is actually kind of offensive, because when you say that, you're making it seem like only Arabs can recite the Quran properly, right? Or you have to be from a certain country to recite the Quran properly. That's not a compliment. Maybe they'll be like, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry. But I didn't even give them that chance. So that's the second thing. First, the person, you're sincere. If someone corrects you, you say, you know what, I'll fix it. Number two, we have to do the correcting in a kind and a gentle and a merciful manner, right? Because even even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, you know, talk to people with ihsan, and even when you're correcting them, correcting with ihsan, even in your with your own enemies, when you're dealing with them, deal with them with ihsan, because they might actually become your closest friend, right? So and this is in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this. So you have to be, when you're correcting someone, you have to do it with in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to deal with people, and that is with that is with love, and with kindness and with ihsan. So I'll stop there, inshallah. Let Brother Edward finish off.
Jazakallah khairan. Imam Arshad, repeat the question for me. We've gone through two people now, so repeat the meat of the question for me.
Yeah, so it was, when people have their racist tendencies called out, they tend to jump towards an extreme, maybe so in a defensive fashion that, but I am not a racist, kind of a reaction, even though they may have said something, done something that, as Hassan mentioned, is actually very, very problematic. But how should they react when they're called out on, and then basically how should we react when we're called out on our actions?
Well, look, I mean, number one, for the person who's doing the correcting, right? We as Muslims know that there are ways in which you correct someone, ways in which you give someone advice, and that those ways are just common sense, right? It's something that anyone should be doing. For example, if you can correct someone privately as opposed to publicly, that's helpful, so they don't feel embarrassed, they don't feel like they're being attacked in public. That's great, right? If you do it politely as opposed to aggressively, that's also helpful, right? Instead of getting angry at someone or yelling at someone, politely, respectfully, that can help get a more positive response, okay? And then, of course, try, if you're correcting someone, to understand where they're coming from, what kind of experiences they may have had, what kind of background they may have had that led them to make that mistake. Don't necessarily assume the worst about their intentions, their history, or their viewpoints. Which brings me to the point of the view of the second person, the person being corrected. Just because someone tells you or informs you that you've made a comment that is racist does not mean that they are saying you are a racist. It is possible to say something inappropriate, something that is prejudiced, something that may even be racist, without you necessarily in your heart having a hatred for people of a certain color or thinking that people of a certain color are less than you. Sometimes people say stupid things, inappropriate things, offensive things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is who they are as a person. It doesn't mean you're ready to put on a Klansman's hood and start setting crosses on fire or anything, right? So if you're being corrected, don't hear things that have not been said, right? Don't assume that when someone says, brother, that is racist, that doesn't mean they're saying, brother, you are a racist, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, take the advice for what it's worth. Don't reject it outright. If you don't feel like you have to accept it right then and there, don't do that either. But think about what they're saying, right? Take it to heart, take some time to think about it and chew on it, and then come back to them later to finish the discussion, especially if they came to you privately as opposed to publicly and spoke to you politely as opposed to aggressively. Then you should give the same response to them, a polite response in private, not flipping out and not becoming unruly. And the other thing I would say is that, we all have some sort of implicit bias towards people. Okay, everyone has this to some extent. I was in a law school class, years ago, and the class was about juries and jury selection. And so as part of the class, we all had to take an implicit bias test to see if we had some biases we were not aware of. Because your typical juror would say, well, I'm not a racist, I don't have any racist views, but they may not realize they have implicit biases that could impact how they rule for or against a defendant in a case. So I remember there was a woman in the class, white liberal student, and she was shocked that the implicit bias test told her that she might have some negative views about Muslims and people people who look Muslim, and she was just amazed that she had these latent feelings, right? And I remember to myself thinking that, as a Black person, when I took the test and it showed me where my biases lied, I can't remember exactly, but I don't think I was surprised right? I think I was expecting to say, oh yeah, I can see that. I can see why I might have those kind of latent biases, right? Why I might react to someone in one way that I would another way. For example, at my mosque, often I would give the a host our interfaith open houses once a month. And so, honestly, if an old person, like an older white person, showed up, welcome them in, happy to see them, right? But I remember one time I saw a guy show up. I think he was muscular, dressed a certain way, white male. And I thought to myself, do I need, you start, do I need to run or do I need to welcome this person in, right? And that's a bias, right? That is a bias, right? Part of it racial, right? Because if he'd been black, I probably wouldn't have had that same thought. I would have assumed, oh, he's black, he's probably okay with Muslims, right? Is that silly? Is that dumb? Is that racist? Arguably so, right? And so that's something I had to acknowledge in myself and correct. Doesn't mean that I'm not careful. Doesn't mean I'm not safe. Doesn't mean I wasn't watching the hands of this person who seemed like they kind of looked like the typical image of someone who might do something, but I didn't act on it, right? I didn't let that latent thought lead me to do something inappropriate. And I was able to check myself and keep that in mind. So everyone has these biases of some sort. It could be an anti-black bias, an anti-white bias. Black people, though, tend to be more so than others, I dare say, the victims of this bias. And the bias comes often from people who don't realize they have the bias. That's what's really dangerous, when someone has an implicit bias that they do not recognize, right? Like that woman in Central Park, what's her name? Her real name. Her name isn't Karen. Her name is Amy Cooper. Amy Cooper, right? She's apparently a liberal Democrat. She donated to political Democratic candidates, was a supporter of Pete Buttigieg. Even when she was saying, I'm going to call the police on you, she was very PC. She said, I'm going to tell them an African-American man. She didn't say an N-word or anything. Like, she was very PC, right, as she was being racist, right? So she had some biases that were not only implicit, but pretty overt that she may not have been aware of up until that moment. So we all have these things. Don't feel offended if someone calls you out on it and asks you to correct yourself. Take the advice, try to work with it, and try to be better, inshallah.
Inshallah. A couple more questions here. I'll say two of them at the same time. So one of them is asking how to change an immigrant Muslim mentality. There are a few masajid, for instance, that would celebrate Black History Month. Very few Islamic schools will have MLK Day off or recognize or celebrate Black key historical figures. So that's one question that's coming up, and that's, again, we in our community, we might find that very common. And the other one is, do you think that you identifying as Muslim contributes to your self-awareness about your own bias? And I can repeat those if you'd like, but the first one is about Muslim institutions, masajid and Islamic schools, not giving importance to Black history and like days like MLK off, etc. And the other one, do you think that you identifying as a Muslim contributes to your self-awareness about your own bias? It's a deep question.
So, somebody want to go first?
Let's go in order, inshallah. Off to you.
Okay, inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
For the first question, I think that when it comes to institutions that we are a part of, and like schools and things of that nature, we can complain a lot about what they're not doing, but it's important for us to set forth what we like. It's important for us to take a stand as well. So if you realize that your masjid does not celebrate Black History Month, for example, then it's important for you to go to your masjid and talk to the imam, talk to the people in charge and say, hey, I noticed we don't celebrate Black History Month. Here's a list of very amazing, Black people that we should celebrate in this month, and we should have a billboard or poster or whatever the case may be. And I'm willing to be the one to organize it and take care of it. So there you left no room for excuses from the masjid's organization as to why it can't happen. They're not going to say, they may, depending upon which masjid you work at, or you're going to, or you're attending at, but you are giving both a criticism and a solution at the same time. You're saying that, hey, I noticed that this is what's lacking in our community. And then you go ahead and you say, you know what, but let me help you fix it. Let me provide the solution for you. And that goes a long way compared to just saying, this is lacking. Let me write you all these letters, knowing that you're probably not going to read them. and you're not going to find anybody, or you're not going to even look for anybody to come and fix this problem. Now, it's a different conversation if you provide a solution and your community then tells you, no, I'm not going to do it. That's a whole nother conversation. And I'm not personally of the opinion of, fighting like that in that sense. I'm of the opinion of doing smaller things on a smaller scale. Like, these people don't own the masjid, so you may come one day and, decide to gather a group of people and have a very nice little program. You know what I'm saying? Like, have a nice little discussion. Like, these different things can happen. You can work around it. You can work around the people who may be racist and not want to establish that. But I would say, first and foremost, make sure you go to your masjid. You talk to the people who are in charge and you say, we're celebrating Black History Month 2021. No questions asked. I will take care of everything. I just need you to give me the wall that I can display this on. And it's great. I know for a fact that RCM is very much so willing. Actually, RCM staff is the one who put together the Black History Month things in the past, but they're very much willing to have, members of the community come and take a hand in these types of situations. The second thing about Islamic schools, Islamic schools are a whole nother case of racism. If we're going to be 1000% honest here, they're a whole nother case. And I would actually prefer, even though I know Imam Arshad is staying out of this conversation per se, but I will actually prefer Imam Arshad to answer this particular portion about Islamic schools, because he has a much better track record at dealing with Islamic schools than I do. I personally have just been, I kind of lay low, to be completely honest, what Ustad Hassan was saying before, because when it comes to these different things, coming from as a person who is a Gambian American person and like Black, it comes off very aggressive. And I'm like, you have to have MLK Day, this and that. Then it's like, oh, she's being angry, she's being aggressive, and so I take a huge step back when it comes to these particular situations. But I know that when I was working in Islamic school, what I did at that time with the students, even though they didn't take MLK Day off, was that I had a small little history lesson with them. Like, it takes nothing. I took 5 minutes from class and I taught them about, Martin Luther King and civil rights movement, all this stuff. And alhamdulillah, some of their teachers also took the entire period to educate them. And I will give the teachers that as well. And I think that if you have if you know Islamic schools in your area, maybe you don't even go to Islamic school, Islamic schools in your areas, they're always looking for volunteers. Be sure you volunteer on MLK Day. You're going to volunteer on that day. You'll bring in some nice books, give some nice little gifts to the kids, and talk to them about Black History Month, talk to them about Martin Luther King, and keep it pushing. Maybe they won't invite you to volunteer again, but maybe they will. The possibilities are endless. So those are my suggestions. And I would like to ask Imam Arshad about the whole Islamic school situation. How would you proceed with that?
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. I'm going to just say something very short, and that's, alhamdulillah, I've been fortunate enough to work with Muslim educators and Islamic schools at a national level quite a few times, and, heard from a lot of board members, principals, community members from various different communities, both from the United States and Canada. And it's, Islamic schools are a product of the minds of those who are heavily involved in them. And those minds, again, when we talk about, especially Islamic schools that are founded by members of the immigrant Muslim community, if we already we're already talking about issues that exist within, the non-Black Muslim community when it comes to Black Muslims, then naturally, those representations are going to be found in whatever institute we start. By the way, it could be a relief organization, it can be an Islamic school, it can be a project promoting social justice, whatever it is. If we are not in tune, or we're not involving the right people, then we're always going to come to the wrong conclusions, right? And so we have to understand, the Muslim community needs to do a deep down search. If we are not giving MLK Day off, if we are not acknowledging Black History Month, but we're sending our kids to do all these other competitions and all these other things and etc. There's a huge problem that we have to address within ourselves. And again, this is that piece of advice that hopefully our community is getting, inshallah, that that's a problem. If we want to be supportive of the Black Lives Matter and the struggle of Black people in this country, but we don't even want to acknowledge the day that has a purpose to be acknowledged, a real purpose to be acknowledged, by the way, a lot more than, or Columbus Day doesn't even deserve, I think, an acknowledgement. But there's a serious problem. Again, they're a reflection of our institutions, are a reflection of our minds and our limitations when we kind of think about this stuff. But I do want to ask Ustad Hassan and Brother Edward if they have thoughts on this as well. And again, I'll repeat the other question, is that do you think that identifying as Muslim contributes to your self-awareness about your own bias? And I think the way I'm interpreting that is that if me saying that I'm a Muslim, automatically now I am aware that, oh, I don't have to be racist, so I can't be. That's how I'm interpreting it, but I'm not sure if that's what the intention behind the question was.
All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahim. The first question, I'll try to be as brief as possible. So the first question, I think it's important that we, like Ustad Fatima said, we try to do our part in educating and letting people know that something is important to us. In my own field, in my own work, I myself have had to tell my work, like, why don't we have MLK off? I'm not trying to be a lazy bum and just sit at home. I think it should be off. Now, it hasn't happened, but at least I said something. So if I don't show up to work, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's because I've already said something at that point. So now, you have a decision to make. But I haven't not showed up to work. Alhamdulillah. I'm just saying, like, if that was the case, because I decided years, like, I'm saying something over and over again. But I do think that if we're going to say that, especially with Islamic schools, let's say Fulton County, we say whenever Fulton County is off, we go with their calendar. When they're off, we're off. Except with Black History, and except with MLK Day, and except with, that doesn't make sense. As a matter of fact, that almost seems like that's a racist thing to do, because you're giving all the other holidays off, right? But then when it comes to the holidays that are exclusively Black in nature, MLK Day, you don't want to give that off. How do you do that and then say, oh no, I don't have anything against Black folk, or I don't have any racial racist tendencies or any of that stuff. You have to check yourself. That is absolutely incorrect. That's wrong. You can't do that. That's number one. And then I finish off with that, because that should be obvious. We should all, MLK should be off. We should do Black History events at our masajids and at our schools, because we are part of this country, and even this country, who's still racist, acknowledges that. Even if it's fake, at least they're doing something to, hey, look, we gave you this. Then, like, where should we stand as Muslims? We should be doing more than them. You understand what I'm saying? So, like, it doesn't make sense. But number two, as far as us being Muslims and is being are we more aware of our implicit biases, or should we be more aware of our implicit biases? Absolutely, we should be more aware, because a Muslim, again, the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, we're always thinking, we're always aware of our situation. We do a lot of intrinsic reflection, right? We do a lot of self-reflection. So therefore, that should get us to always, be careful. Like, oh wait, I did this here, or I did that there, or this and that, or you see what I'm saying? So we should be the ones that are always thinking, and because of our level of thought, we should always be aware of what we're doing, how we're acting, what we're saying, everything, right? The Prophet ﷺ always tells us, like, be careful what comes out of your mouth, right? If you don't have anything good to say, just don't say anything. Just imagine just that, right? You take that hadith and you say, if I don't have anything good to say, I won't say anything. Now, if you refrain from saying something, now you're aware that whatever it is that you were going to say was a negative thing. So therefore, you didn't say it. So the reflective person would say, why was I going to say that bad thing? Was it because I feel negatively about such and such? Was it because you see what I'm saying? So automatically, being a Muslim comes with that. It's a natural thing. It should be. We should always be reflecting.
So in terms of the school issue, I would defer to what are my two young co-guests have said on that topic. I think that, I would just note that when kids are young, that is perhaps the most dangerous time in terms of one being a victim of racism and also being a perpetrator of racism, because kids follow what their parents say, first of all. So if they're getting ingrained with those things early on and no one's calling them on it at school or in the home, especially at school, if they can get away with it with permission from the teachers or the principals, you got a real problem on your hands, right? But if the school can be the stopping ground, the point where they say, hold on now, I know what's going on in your house, but that is not okay here, that may be the only time they learn it is not acceptable to call a Black person this or to say this or do that, right? So if it's not happening in the family home, then the school is the opportunity where it can be stopped there, where the student can be corrected, again, not in a way that traumatizes them, but in a way that is productive and helpful to their growth, inshallah. And then in terms of the second issue of, does my faith help me be more aware? Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, as Muslims, we are, taught that no human being, none of us alive are perfect. We all make mistakes. We all need to work on cleaning our heart, and to be wary of diseases of the heart, which is something that is incredibly dangerous and something that haunts me personally, being in the position I'm in a public position. And so those diseases of the heart can also include racism. And so, I would say that I certainly hope that having the gift of Deen, of Iman, of Islam has led me become more aware of, whatever latent biases I may have. Certainly hope so anyway.
Yeah, and I do want to add that I have been directly approached and told that from members of the Muslim community that other members of the Muslim community have asked the question, why are we letting in so many Black kids in this school? Just directly, I'm gonna say it because that's something that was brought to my attention, that actually that was a request for me to give a khutbah on racism within our community, because that was a comment made within our community to another person in our community. And this is not, I'm talking about Roswell, right? So I'm not talking about anywhere far off from where we are. So this is a reality that, subhanAllah, is and it's disgusting. I mean, the comment was disgusting, and we have to call it out for what it is. I do want to maybe bring one more question in that kind of takes us a little bit outside of our community, but it does shine a light on what's happening. And this is the question that, or the comment that basically pertains to the police departments in the United States getting training from the Gili, right? Is what is called in Georgia, it's called Gili, the Georgia Israeli Law Enforcement Exchange, if I'm understanding it correctly, but there is training that happens internationally.
Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange.
Okay,
Israel, the Israeli government was its original and still its primary training partner, but they also have worked with China, Egypt, Hungary. As you all know, Hungary is led by an anti-Semitic authoritarian. China is run by anti-Muslim authoritarians who've got millions of Uyghur Muslims locked in concentration camps, not to mention all the other things they've done to dissidents and protesters. And of course, Egypt, no offense to anyone who has certain political views, but we know what the Egyptian government has done to activists within that country. So yes, that is Gili. Yeah. Continue, Imam. Sorry, I didn't mean to
No, that's basically the question is that, so when we know that our police departments are getting their training from there, is there something we can do to demand an end to that? And I do believe that's something that maybe CARE is working on.
Yeah, it's something we've been working on for a while now. So I think the first thing is that we've got to have internal Muslim unity on this issue in the Muslim community. We have become, alhamdulillah, we've made great progress in terms of our political engagement, our civic engagement. But when CARE alerted the Muslim community to this issue and asked the entire Muslim community to sign on to our letter to the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, asking her to fulfill her campaign pledge to investigate and freeze Atlanta's participation in Gili. Most mosques signed on, most Muslim organizations signed on, but not all did. I'm not going to mention which one or ones did not, but I will just say for those who did not sign, I hope that now they will reconsider signing and that they will join that letter and that they will use the influence they may have with the city of Atlanta, with Mayor Bottoms, with other political and civic leaders to say it is not acceptable for the police officers who are sworn to serve and protect us to get training from foreign governments that engage in police brutality, whether it's the Chinese government, the Israeli government, the Hungarian government, the Egyptian government, whatever, they should not be training with them. And by the way, this program was founded by a man named Robert Friedman, who is an anti-Muslim and anti-Arab bigot. You can go to the Gilley website and find his writings, crazy stuff about claiming that no Muslim leader ever condemned the 9/11 attacks, that Arab American advocacy groups support terrorism, that Jimmy Carter should be labeled genocidal because of his support for Palestinian human rights. Just crazy stuff that is on their website as we speak, supporting the Iraq War, calling for bombing Iran, just crazy stuff. Our officers are going to train with this man and with these governments. Why? Every Georgian should have a problem with this, but especially every Georgia Muslim, every Georgia Muslim organization. So I would just say to those of you who you know who you are, who didn't sign the letter, use your influence to help us to win this fight. And then separately, I would say, after we've got internal Muslim unity on the issue, once we've got that done, inshallah, then I think we have to, county by county, district by district, speak to our sheriffs, speak to our chiefs of police, and tell them we do not want our police departments to go on these trips, to be involved in this program, because it's a private program. No one has to participate, right? But it's well funded by political conservatives and pro-Israel groups. And so they've got a lot of money and they can give these people free trips, so give these cops free trips overseas. And so cops want to go, right? And it's the most popular international exchange program for Georgia officers. So you've got to tell your local communities, your Roswell police chief, right? Your Fulton County police chief or sheriff, we've got to do this county by county and let them know why this is a problem. CARE has created a pamphlet, a booklet that details the crazy training materials in Gilley, details the bigotry. If you want that, we can share that with you. You can use that in your local meetings and interactions with police. So that's what I would say to all the mosques that have, taken time to form relationships with your local law enforcement to make sure they're helping to protect the community and also not giving grief to the community. Use those relationships as an opportunity to inform them of this issue and to address this issue with them.
And I'm not going to say anything about that. That is more Edward's thing. But I would just say on the Islamic side that this is, it goes back to what we were talking about. If we as Muslims, if every single masjid or Muslim organization did not sign off on this, then we don't have the unity that we claim to have. And our hearts are truly not together, because let me tell you, if police brutality was against, quote unquote, the predominant attendees of said mosque, we wouldn't have to, bend over backwards to try to get them to sign the document or to sign the petition. I guarantee you that. But because what do you see? People of our skin color, those are the ones that are affected by, police brutality. And it's been more documented since Trayvon Martin. It's been documented so much more. So we see it more, but it's been going on, right? Rodney King it was like 30 years, almost 30 years ago, right? So think about that. It's been happening, but it's more documented. But even with that documentation, we're still not getting all of the Muslims to sign off on something that's so obviously wrong, right? So we got to come together, period. And that's really it, period. We just have to come together.
Jazakumullah khair. So I want to just maybe close off on this one final question and get all of y'all's thoughts on this. And we did primarily put this together to make sure our young people have some clarity and direction. And when we talk about calling out our own community for the issues that we see problematic in the wider community as well, what is the role of a young person? So you have the uncle versus the kid, right? The ammu versus the shabab, and the beta versus the uncle, right? So how does, should a young person that's maybe a high schooler, college age student, what advice would you give them if they're in the company or in the presence of elders who are behaving in a way that is very, very problematic? And again, this is something that happens quite often. Growing up, I know myself how uncomfortable it was to be in a gathering of adults when they would tell a joke about a black person, right? And you have black friends, and you obviously know that these are stereotypes, etc., that are not true and that are very racist. But what advice would you give to that young person in that situation? And again, that's something I'll leave up to you guys to inshallah end off with. Ustada.
Can I go second? The hard
Sheikh
one.
Edward.
Oh no, I'll go after Hassan.
Oh no.
Oh wow. Okay, you guys are
Passing.
all right.
They're gonna have to calm everybody down after you speak, Hassan. So go ahead.
Yeah, I rile people up. I need to stop doing that.
No, you don't, brother.
So here's what I would say, because I deal with young people more so than I even deal with elders and adults. That young people themselves need to check themselves. Young people of obviously other non-black, to the point where here's the reality of what's happening. Right, you'll have a young person, Arab person or Desi person, and or others, right? We use those because those are predominant, but others, and they'll have black friends. And because they have black friends, they seem to think that they are allotted certain privileges. Let's just put that, right. They have certain privileges to say certain things or maybe a certain word, right? That it's like, oh no, man, my black friend gave me the key card, right? The black card. I'm allowed to say it. I've had to myself because with my young people, I don't hesitate to check them. So I've had to myself multiple times look, give the eye to someone like, bro, what did you just say? Right? Because and they thought it was cool. It's like, what? And I'm just like, don't say that, right? I can't control you saying that outside of this, but don't mention that in front of me. I don't like that word. I don't go around using that word. How dare you think you can just come and say, you understand what I'm saying? So I would say young people themselves, first and foremost, got to check that, okay? Because they're also, we seem to think that just because you have a black friend means that you don't have these, again, implicit biases or so on and so forth. No, that's just not how it works, right? So check yourself, okay? Stop using certain terminology. You understand what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with you, borrowing from our culture. We don't mind that, but come with respect. You understand what I'm saying? We see a lot of borrowing from our culture, but when it comes down to speaking out against what's happening to us, everybody's mute and everybody's silent, and you're still going about your day, but you think that you're allowed to use that word. Like how do you even equate those two? So I would say check that, and then once you check your own self, because you can't check others without checking yourself. Once you check your own self and you say, you know what, I get it. I get it. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not supposed to be using that. You're aware. Once you become aware, that's the only time you can actually, uh, see that there's something wrong with how maybe your people in your own families are interacting, or what they're saying about black people, African Americans, so on and so forth. Right? That's the only time you'll care. I've had people tell me like, yes, people in my family have used the word and they continue to use the word Abid. And I'm just like, and you haven't said anything? No, because the way they're using it, this and that. I'm just like, see, there's the problem. There's the problem. As soon as the word is being used, something inside of you should be triggered, right? There should be like a spidey sense, as they say, right? There should be like a spidey sense that triggers in your mind to be like, yo, that's wrong. But if you don't have that, then that means you yourself have been influenced by that or by the way, by their teaching and so on and so forth, which makes sense because, if they're the ones raising you and so on and so forth, you're going to be influenced by their teachings, right? But now is the time, and that's why we're here. Now is the time to be able to realize we're telling you that that's wrong. Take it as it's wrong and try to fix it. First fix yourself, and then inshallah you can you have to stand up for what's right, even if it's against your own self, right? Amar Imad always gets me to read that ayah at fundraisers. So it's one of those things, like, even if it's against your own self, stand up for justice and stand up for what's right, even if it's against your own self, your own family, your own kin. It does not matter, because you'll feel good about yourself, and at the very least they'll know where you stand on the issue. So maybe they'll be a little bit more hesitant to be so free around you, speaking like that or talking like that, or having those racist conversations, or calling black people the Abid, slave, and so on and so forth.
I'm just going to say I second what has been said. I don't think I have anything unique to add. I agree.
Ustad.
I would just add just one thing in terms of our nature of, dealing with family members, especially. Because a lot of times when we hear correcting, when we say, okay, you have to correct or you have to educate, we think people automatically think they have to be rude. They have to be like, how dare you, like, uproar in the middle of dinner? Like, no, you can correct your people, the people in your home, your family, you can correct them in a way that does not have to be rude. Okay. For example, if someone in your family uses a certain derogatory term, or they, make a racist comment, you can say that that's not okay. You can say that very nicely. You can say, very calmly, that this is not okay, that we don't, this is not a good way to, talk to people about people like that. That's actually a stereotype. That's actually not true about them. Like, you can say these things and maybe it'll go in one ear out the other, but you did your part. It doesn't mean that you become disrespectful. It doesn't mean that you, cause chaos. It doesn't mean that you start yelling and screaming and cursing and all these things. No, you correct and you keep it pushing, you do your part. The second thing that I want to echo from what Ustad Hassan said was making sure that you recognize your own privilege. I think that goes a very long way, because when you recognize your own privilege, you recognize, the fact that there are certain things that you don't have to even think about, let alone deal with. Then you start to see the plight of others. You start to see the hardship that other people go through, and it's actually a heart softener. And for me personally, what I can say is that kind of something that Ustad Hassan brought up earlier is that my struggles in America are not the same as the struggles that African Americans experience. My parents were able to immigrate here and come to America and, practice their deen freely because of the struggles that actually African Americans put down and were able to, endure, and not by choice, but what they endured, and the foundations that they established here in this country. And so, if anything, like, I owe it to my brothers and sisters who are African American a lot. A huge thank you and a huge, appreciation for all that they've done. And the least that I can do is that if somebody in my family, or if somebody that some person that I know that I may have considered a friend, says something derogatory, says something disrespectful, says something racist, let them know that this is not okay. But I don't have to also put that person down and dehumanize that person to get my point across. Actually, I can still, have a civil conversation with you, but I can also let you know that, hey, it's not okay to refer to people in this way. It's not okay to treat people this way, and I don't want to be a part of it. Simple.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakumullah khairan to all of you for your time. I know we've been going on for quite a while. MashaAllah, we've kept quite a bit of our viewers. Most of them have stayed on, MashaAllah, for this entire time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each and every single one of you for taking the time to listen, to take the time to become a little bit more aware, inshallah ta'ala. And again, recognize that we have plenty of experienced and knowledgeable voices, those that are present here and those that are not, in our communities. One of the pieces of advice I gave on Friday was to let the right people take the lead and not to step in a circle where you don't belong. And that's a very, very important thing to remember whenever we're dealing with things that upset all of us and things that make all of us frustrated and infuriated, especially for our young people. Recognize that there are people that have been dealing with this in the United States for decades, if not centuries, right? And so there's been a passing down of movement after movement after movement. And we're not going to be the first ones to respond to something like this. And so we need to really, as Ustad Hassan mentioned in other scenarios as well, we got to check ourselves and make sure we're not inserting ourselves in spaces we don't belong. Rather, we need to insert ourselves in the right capacity. And for those of us that are not, Black Muslims, when in the face of this, we need to make sure that we give Black, from the Muslim perspective, we need to make sure that we give Black Muslim leadership the reins, and then we're all gathering behind them, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for our faults. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to realize, the Reformation movement that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam led. He led people to change drastically their views on so many things, on so many grounds. And it was, as Brother Edward was mentioning, having that grounding of faith is extremely important. The Prophet sallallahu by Allah's blessing and miracles was able to lead a people that had really backward views about so many things into such drastic change. And then we still find that they had at times, as Ustad Fatima brought up as well, there were remnants that would pop up here and there, and we're not part of that best generation. And so we are likely to have a lot more issues within ourselves. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to reflect and see what we have inside of ourselves of evil. There's a dua the Prophet ﷺ used to, he taught us to make, and that was, oh Allah, I ask you for, forgiveness from the things that I know that I do are wrong, and from the things that I don't even know that I do are wrong, right? From the types of shirk that are hidden, from the types of shirk that are apparent. And so, these are all part of our tradition as well. And so we definitely need to make sure that we embrace our faith in a very important way. But again, when it comes to issues, we let the right people take the lead. Allah has told us, "Fas'alu ahla dhikri in kuntum la ta'lamun." Ask the people who have experience, who understand, who have the dhikr, the knowledge, if you yourself don't know. And may we be people that do that, inshallah. Brother Edward, did you have any final words you wanted to say?
No, I just want to, I'll say to everyone, to RCM, to everyone who was on the community call the other night about this issue, that what you all are doing is the right thing, responding to a tragedy by using it as an opportunity to do something good in the places you can impact change. So whether it's RCM hosting this call, so many Muslims getting together to talk to each other in Georgia about what we can do to address this issue, this is the right way to handle it. So I'm happy to see this happening, even if it's under these tragic circumstances. And I'm especially happy to see young people like Fatima, like Hassan, alhamdulillah, sharing their wisdom and being so wise at such a young age. May Allah protect the next generation of Muslims in America and guide us, our intentions and our decisions and our actions and our outcomes to be pleasing to him and pleasing to us and successful in this life and the next. So thank you to RCM for hosting this call. Jazakallah khair.
Wayakum. Jazakumullah khair, everybody. And we'll end, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good to see you, Mom.
Always. You too.
Alhamdulillah.